My name is Theron Weaver, and I was told to leave my own daughter's wedding, a wedding I had paid for with every last cent of my retirement savings. Imagine standing in the doorway watching strangers enjoy a $120,000 celebration you financed only to be cast aside like you didn't matter. But I didn't walk away in shame. I had come prepared, and with me was a man whose very presence would rip the mask off my daughter's groom and expose him for the fraud he truly was. That night, chandeliers sparkled, champagne flowed, and a single truth shattered everything Urban Green had built. Before I begin this story, I want to ask you, where are you watching from and how old are you? Please subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked to hear more unforgettable stories like this one. Get out. You weren't invited. Those words cut deeper than any knife could. They weren't shouted by a stranger, but by the man who had just married my daughter in a ballroom glittering with my money. I stood there in silence, remembering the phone call that had first tipped me off to this betrayal. It had been an ordinary Friday evening at my modest Chicago home. I'd cooked Margaret's old meatloaf recipe, something I still made on quiet nights, to feel close to her. The fork had barely touched my lips when the phone rang. My sister-in-law Nora bubbled with excitement about what she called tomorrow's big day. Her words froze me mid-bite. Tomorrow, Violet's wedding wasn't supposed to be for another week. I thought she was confused, but Nora rattled off details. The groom's parents had already flown in from New York. Relatives from Boston were checked into the Fairmont, and Violet was preparing for an intimate family ceremony at 2 o'clock. My hand tightened around the receiver. On the wall hung Margaret's old calendar where I had circled the real date in red ink, April 19th. Tomorrow was only April 12th. I asked Nora again, certain she had mixed things up, but she insisted Urban, my daughter's fiancé, had personally called her with the details. My stomach turned. He had called everyone but me. I hung up and dialed Violet with shaking hands. She answered with her usual cheer, the same warmth she'd used when she was a little girl, running through the house, calling Daddy, I'm home. But when I asked her directly, there was a 7-second pause that felt like a lifetime. Finally, she admitted it. Tomorrow was a small ceremony for Urban's relatives, and the real celebration was still scheduled for next week. She called it a formality, nothing important. Nothing important. Yet my retirement savings, $120,000, had been drained to pay for it all. Every dollar had been written in careful checks, signed by me, fueled by the hope that my daughter would have a beautiful start to her marriage. Now I wasn't even deemed worthy of a seat at the table. I ended the call politely, but inside something broke. I poured myself a glass of Margaret's favorite whiskey, the one I'd been saving for a special occasion. The amber liquid burned down my throat, but it wasn't as sharp as the betrayal gnawing in my chest. For months, I had ignored the unease in Urban's smooth voice, the way he avoided eye contact when talking about money, the way he spoke about family investments, like a salesman rather than a son-in-law. That night, staring at the neat stack of receipts, I'd kept $15,000 for the venue, $28,000 for catering, $8,500 for photography. I felt like a fool. But I wasn't going to stay a fool. Margaret's picture smiled down at me from the mantel. In that moment, I heard her voice as clearly as if she were still alive. Don't be a doormat, Theron. Fight back. And that's when the phone rang again. A calm, professional voice introduced himself as a private investigator from Los Angeles. His name was Winfield Elliott, and he said he had information about Urban Green, information I needed to hear before it was too late. When the stranger on the line introduced himself as a private investigator, I almost laughed. What business could a man like that possibly have with me? But his next words wiped away any thought of humor. Mr. Weaver, he said, his voice measured, deliberate, we share a mutual interest. Urban Green has already cost me $2 million. He nearly destroyed my life, and now I believe he is about to destroy yours." I gripped the receiver tighter, staring at the half-empty glass of whiskey on my table. I hadn't told him a thing about my daughter, about the wedding, about the lies. Yet somehow this man already knew. "Why should I trust you?" I asked. "Because Urban has a pattern," he replied. "He finds men like us men who want to believe men with something worth losing. He charms, he manipulates, and when he's taken everything, he walks away smiling. I can prove it. But you'll have to meet me." My mind raced. For weeks I'd been second-guessing my instincts, telling myself I was overprotective, that Violet was an adult who had chosen her path. Yet here was a stranger confirming everything Margaret had warned me about before she died, that one day someone would try to take advantage of my generous heart. I agreed to meet him. He gave me an address on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles, a suite in a professional building. He spoke calmly, with the confidence of a man who had been waiting years for this conversation. "Mr. Weaver," he said, before hanging up, "if you want your daughter to know the truth, you'll get on the first flight out. Tomorrow may be too late." I barely slept that night. When the alarm buzzed at dawn, I was already dressed. I ate a quick breakfast of toast and jam, though every bite felt heavy. The kitchen that had always been my safe place now seemed claustrophobic, full of betrayal. By 7, I was at O'Hare with a single carry-on and a one-way ticket to Los Angeles. On the plane, I stared out at the clouds, my thoughts tangled. I remembered Urban sitting in my living room months earlier, spinning stories about how the wedding would be an investment in family legacy. He'd leaned forward in Margaret's old armchair, his voice soft, almost reverent, as he spoke of love, partnership, and future grandchildren. He had known exactly what to say to a lonely widower who longed to see his daughter happy. 4 hours later, I was standing in front of a glass building in downtown Los Angeles, my palms damp despite the cool afternoon breeze. Inside on the 12th floor, I found him Winfield Elliott. He was tall, with sharp eyes that seemed to measure everything at once. His handshake was firm, professional. Spread across his desk were folders, photographs, bank statements, contracts, more paper than I could process at first glance. He motioned for me to sit. "You deserve to know who your future son-in-law really is," he said. For the next hour, he laid out Urban's past like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Every document was a nail, and with each one, the coffin around my trust grew tighter. The manila folders looked harmless enough at first, but the moment Winfield spread them across his desk, I felt the air grow heavier. Contracts, bank transfers, emails, even photographs, all pointing to a truth I had refused to see. Urban Green wasn't just careless with money. He was a professional con artist. Winfield spoke with the calm rhythm of someone who had repeated this story too many times. "We co-founded a company," he explained, Crypto Flow. "I built the technology, the model, the strategy. He handled investors. It seemed like the perfect match." He slid a document toward me, until this happened. I leaned forward, my engineer's eyes scanning the fine print. Urban's signature sat beside Winfield's, on an agreement that looked fair until you read the clauses buried deep in legal jargon. Phrases like sole discretion and controlling interest leapt out at me. "He crafted these from the start," I muttered. Winfield nodded grimly. "He planned it before the ink was dry. Within months, he siphoned funds, $2 million, into personal accounts. He filed new incorporation papers that erased me completely. And then when I tried to fight, his lawyers bled me dry with technicalities. Legally, he walked away untouchable. Ethically, he's a thief." I studied the bank statements, the transfers highlighted in yellow. My chest tightened with every line item. $2 million here, $250,000 there. Numbers that could change a man's life stolen with the stroke of a pen. And now he's marrying my daughter, I said quietly. Winfield met my gaze. With your money funding the wedding. The words landed like a hammer. For months I had told myself it was worth it. Every dollar of my retirement poured into Violet's happiness. Now I saw it for what it was, fuel for a con man's latest performance. I sat back the leather chair, groaning under my weight. Memories flickered: Margaret's laugh at the dinner table, Violet's first dance recital, her college graduation. I had worked decades for those moments, saved carefully, so she could have a better future. And here was Urban turning it all into champagne bubbles and floral arrangements at the Fairmont. Winfield's tone softened, as if he recognized the storm building inside me. Mr. Weaver, I know what you're feeling. I've lived it. He took more than my money, he took years of my life. But together, we can stop him. Tomorrow at that wedding with the right audience, we expose him for what he is. Once the truth is public, his mask will never hold again. I looked down at the evidence one last time. It wasn't just paper. It was a mirror reflecting every doubt I had ignored. Urban wasn't simply a bad choice for my daughter, he was dangerous. And Violet, blinded by charm, was walking straight into his trap. I closed the folder slowly, my hand steady now. Tell me what you need from me, I said. For the first time, Winfield smiled. Not the smile of a salesman, but the grim acknowledgement of two men who had been wronged and were ready to fight back. I left Winfield's office with the weight of the folder still pressing on my chest, though I hadn't taken it with me. The evidence remained on his desk, but the images of contracts, bank statements, and damning emails were burned into my mind. Outside Los Angeles, traffic roared, horns blaring and engines rumbling, but it all felt muted compared to the storm inside me. For years, I had thought my greatest weakness was loneliness. After Margaret died, I'd clung to Violet, pouring everything I had into her future. When Urban appeared with his easy smile and polished shoes, I convinced myself he was the answer to my daughter's happiness. Now I realized I had been nothing more than a mark, another step in his long career of deception. On the flight back to San Francisco that night, I looked out the window at the lights below. Each cluster of glowing streets reminded me of the countless hours I'd worked overtime, the decades of careful planning that had built up the savings I had so easily handed over. Margaret's voice echoed in my head again. Don't let anyone take advantage of your generous heart. I clenched my fists, no longer feeling like a discarded father, but like a man awakening from a long sleep. The humiliation of being excluded from the family ceremony was no longer just an insult. It was my inciting moment, the push I needed to fight back. When the plane touched down, I checked into a modest hotel near Union Square. The clerk asked if I was in town for the wedding. For a moment, I almost laughed. Something like that, I said. In my room, I hung my only suit on the closet door, realizing it looked tired, just like me. If I was going to stand in that ballroom and face Urban, I needed to look like more than a grieving widower with a crumpled jacket. I needed armor. The next morning, I walked into Nordstrom and let a salesman talk me into a charcoal gray suit that fit perfectly across my shoulders. As he adjusted the tie, I caught my reflection in the mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't see a broken man. I saw someone who still had fight left in him. Margaret would have approved, I thought, blinking back the sting of tears. When I met Winfield again that afternoon, he was carrying a leather case that looked heavier than its size suggested. Inside, he said simply, "Is Urban's undoing." We walked together through the streets of San Francisco, two men bound by betrayal moving toward the Fairmont, where chandeliers and champagne were being paid for with my life's work. Tomorrow we make our move. Winfield set his tone calm but sharp. I nodded, tightening my grip on the handle of my new suit bag. Tomorrow, Urban Green would discover that I was not the weak man he thought he had silenced. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay in the dim hotel room staring at the ceiling while city sounds drifted through the window. The muffled hum of cable cars, the occasional shout from the street below San Francisco pulsed with life, while I wrestled with betrayal. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Violet as a little girl in pigtails running toward me at the park. How had we come to this? A man who had stolen millions now held her heart, and she believed he was her future. By dawn, exhaustion had given way to a hard clarity. I brewed coffee with the hotel's cheap machine, the bitter taste sharp on my tongue. On the desk, I spread my own notes, copies of receipts, contracts, and checks I had written. Each one represented hours of my life, decades of sacrifice. Together with Winfield's evidence, they painted a picture even Urban couldn't charm his way out of. At 9 o'clock, sharp, the phone rang. It was Winfield. His voice was steady, purposeful. "Today's the day, Mr. Weaver. We don't get another chance. Once this wedding becomes public, once his business associates start tying themselves to him, undoing it will be nearly impossible." I looked down at my suit, freshly pressed and waiting on the chair like a soldier's uniform. "I'll be ready," I said. And I meant it. For the first time since Margaret's funeral, I felt a sense of purpose. We met outside a coffee shop across from the Fairmont. From our vantage point, we could see florists wheeling massive arrangements inside catering trucks, unloading crates of champagne, photographers adjusting their equipment. My chest tightened as I recognized the signs of extravagance, each dollar another brick in Urban's facade, each flower a reminder of my savings turned into someone else's stage. Winfield sipped his espresso calmly, but his eyes were sharp, scanning every detail. "Remember," he said, "our strength is the truth. We won't shout. We won't cause a scene. We let the evidence speak, and the audience will do the rest." I nodded, but inside I was burning. For years I had kept my head down, doing the right thing, trusting others to treat me fairly. That chapter of my life ended the moment Urban tried to erase me from my daughter's wedding. As the sun set, we walked back toward our hotels, agreeing to meet again tomorrow, 1 hour before the ceremony. I carried the new suit over my arm, and with every step, I felt less like a victim and more like a man preparing for battle. Back in my room, I set Margaret's photo on the nightstand. Her smile in that old frame was the same one that had guided me through decades of life together. "Tomorrow," I whispered, "I'll protect her just like we always promised we would." The city outside glittered with celebration, but in my heart, the reckoning had already begun. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the kind of day San Francisco likes to boast about. From my hotel window, I could see the streets already alive with tourists and business people. Yet for me, this wasn't just another Saturday. It was the day I would face my daughter's groom with the truth he had spent years burying. I dressed slowly, each piece of clothing feeling symbolic. The crisp shirt, the polished shoes, the charcoal gray suit I had bought just yesterday, all of it came together like armor. As I tightened the knot of my tie, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The man staring back wasn't the broken widower Urban had pegged as an easy mark. He was a father who had reached his limit. He was ready to fight. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, I met Winfield at the Marriott restaurant. The place was buzzing with chatter and clinking silverware, but we sat in a corner booth, our table covered not with plates of pancakes, but with documents. Winfield slid the leather case onto the table like a general laying out battle plans. "This is everything we'll need," he said, his voice low but steady. I sipped my coffee, bitter and grounding, while he reviewed the sequence one more time. We wait until after the vows are spoken when the tension eases. Then, before the reception reaches full swing, we make our move. The goal is maximum audience, maximum credibility. Urban won't be able to laugh it off when 200 of his peers are staring at proof of theft. My stomach churned, not from nerves but from anticipation. For months I had been carrying the quiet shame of feeling duped, used, and discarded. Now I finally had a chance to turn the tables. And Violet, I asked, how do we protect her? Winfield's expression softened for just a moment. She'll be blindsided, yes, but better to learn the truth now than 10 years into a marriage built on lies. Sometimes pain is mercy when it comes early. We spent another hour going over the details. When he spoke, I listened carefully, storing each instruction like a blueprint. I was an engineer by trade, and this was no different than solving a design problem. The variables were people, emotions, and timing, but the principle was the same: find the weakness, expose the flaw, and the whole structure collapses. After breakfast, I excused myself and walked to Union Square. The bustle of shoppers and tourists felt surreal compared to the storm brewing inside me. In the window of a jeweler's shop, diamonds glittered like false promises, reminders of the expensive ring Urban had placed on Violet's finger, bought with money I suspected wasn't entirely his. As I stood there, the weight of my decision settled firmly. There was no turning back. By this evening, my daughter's world would look very different, and so would mine. I whispered to myself, almost like a prayer, "Margaret, give me strength." Today we expose him. By noon, the Fairmont Hotel looked less like a venue and more like a stage. From across the street, I watched florists hauling towers of roses, waiters in crisp uniforms carrying trays of champagne flutes, and photographers positioning themselves for the perfect day. Each detail stabbed at me, my life's savings converted into decorations and bubbles. Winfield arrived with the same quiet precision that marked every move he made. His leather case swung at his side, and though he looked calm, I could sense the weight of years behind his eyes. "Reconnaissance," he murmured as he joined me at the cafe window. "Always know the ground before the battle." Together we observed the parade of guests. Men in tuxedos, women in sequined gowns, young professionals shaking hands with Urban's business partners. I recognized the type: instantly ambitious, sharp, eager to hitch themselves to a man who looked like success. If they only knew. Winfield leaned forward, lowering his voice. "This isn't just about your daughter anymore, Mr. Weaver. Exposing him here means cutting him off at the knees in front of the very people he depends on. Investors, board members, potential clients, they'll scatter like pigeons the moment the truth hits the floor." I nodded, though a lump formed in my throat. My mind kept drifting to Violet. She had always been intelligent, quick to analyze numbers, sharper than me when it came to strategy, but love had dulled her instincts. She believed Urban's charm the way a moth believes in light, never realizing it burns. At 1 o'clock, I returned to my room. The new suit hung ready, a symbol of resolve. I showered, shaved carefully, and dressed as though Margaret herself were straightening my tie. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see defeat. I saw a man reborn, carrying not just anger, but a mission. By 1:30, I met Winfield in the hotel lobby. He wore a dark suit, conservative but commanding, the kind that spoke of authority without show. "You look ready," he said, and for once I believed him. We walked the 4 blocks to the Fairmont in silence, 2 men side by side, bound not by friendship, but by shared betrayal. San Francisco sparkled around us, cable cars, laughter tourists with cameras, but the weight of what we carried was heavier than any city landmark. At the entrance, the doorman greeted us with polished courtesy. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. Here for the Green Weaver wedding." Yes, I answered, my voice even. I'm the bride's father. This is my guest. The man's eyebrows lifted slightly, but he didn't question us. He stepped aside, holding the door as though he knew we weren't just guests, we were the storm rolling in. As we stepped into the marble lobby, I whispered to myself, Margaret, this is for Violet. The Fairmont's marble lobby gleamed under chandeliers, every surface polished to a mirror shine. I had been in elegant hotels before, but never as the man funding the spectacle, never as the father deliberately erased from the guest list. My footsteps echoed faintly as Winfield and I followed the flow of tuxedos and gowns toward the grand ballroom. The music reached us first, a 12-piece orchestra tuning up, filling the air with restrained elegance. Then came the sight itself. When we entered, the scale of it nearly stole my breath. Tables draped in ivory silk stretched across the massive hall, each crowned with floral arrangements so tall they looked like trees. Waiters in white gloves glided through the crowd, balancing trays of champagne, while photographers moved like choreographed dancers, capturing every perfect angle. My chest tightened. Every flower, every note of music, every sparkling glass represented another dollar drained from my savings. This wasn't the intimate celebration Violet once described. This was a performance designed to impress Urban's investors, a launch party for his next conquest. Winfield stayed a half step behind me, his presence quiet but deliberate. His leather case looked out of place among the glitter, but I knew it carried more weight than any jewel in the room. He leaned close and whispered, "Remember, calm is our weapon. He'll try to shout to push you out. Don't let him dictate the tempo." I nodded, though my eyes were locked on the head table. And there she was, Violet, my daughter, my only child. She looked radiant in her white gown, laughter sparkling as Urban leaned close to whisper in her ear. For a moment the sight tore through me. I remembered her as a little girl twirling in Margaret's old veil, pretending to be a bride. Now she sat beside a man who had already destroyed lives. Then across the crowded ballroom, Urban's gaze collided with mine. His champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. I saw the progression on his face, confusion, recognition, and then the raw panic of a man seeing a ghost he thought buried. He muttered something to Violet, set down his glass, and began pushing through the crowd toward me. Conversations faltered as he approached through the orchestra played on. Guests turned their heads, curiosity rising. By the time Urban reached me, his smile was plastered tight, but his eyes betrayed him. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, his voice louder than the setting allowed. "You weren't invited." I kept my tone calm, steady. "Good evening, Urban. I see the party's in full swing." He leaned in, his breath hot with champagne. "Leave now, or I'll have security drag you out." I gestured slightly toward the watching crowd. That would certainly make for an unforgettable memory. "Is that how you want your associates to remember tonight?" His eyes darted around the room. People were noticing, whispers spreading. His carefully crafted facade was cracking, and we hadn't even opened the evidence yet. Urban's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Violet's voice carried across the ballroom. "Dad." The single word sliced through the murmurs of the crowd. Heads turned as she rose from the head table, her white gown trailing like a river of silk behind her. She moved quickly, eyes wide, with a mixture of shock and confusion. I opened my arms slightly, the same gesture I'd used when she was a child, after skinned knees or broken hearts. "Sweetheart, I couldn't miss your wedding." My words were steady, but inside my chest pounded. This wasn't how I wanted her to learn the truth, yet perhaps it was the only way. Urban's hand shot out, gripping her elbow with more force than necessary. "Violet, we need to step outside." Now. His voice cracked on the last word, too sharp, too desperate. It drew a few gasps from nearby guests. She pulled back, frowning. "What's going on? Why is my father here, and who's that man?" Her eyes flicked to Winfield, who stood just behind me, his leather case hanging at his side like a judge's gavel. Urban's face flushed. No one important. Just a bitter old associate trying to cause trouble. Winfield's voice cut through the air with calm authority. "My name is Winfield Elliott. I'm a private investigator from Los Angeles, and I have information about your husband that you need to hear." The orchestra faltered. The violins squeaked into silence. A hush spread through the room. 300 guests stood in their tuxedos and gowns, frozen between disbelief and curiosity. Urban snapped his voice sharp enough to sting. "Enough. This is my wedding, and I won't have it ruined by lies." He turned back to Violet, his hand trembling now. "They're jealous, that's all. Jealous of what we've built together." But Violet's eyes narrowed. She had inherited her mother's intelligence, and I could see it working now. Her gaze moved from Urban's sweaty face to Winfield's steady composure, then back to me. Something in her expression shifted, a spark of doubt igniting. "Jealous," she repeated softly. "My father spent his life working for everything you're celebrating tonight. He emptied his savings for this day." Her voice gained strength with each word. Why would he be jealous? A ripple of whispers spread among the guests. I stood tall, not saying a word. The silence was more powerful than shouting ever could be, Urban stammered. "Because he wants to control you, control us, just like this man tried to control me." He gestured at Winfield, but his words fell flat. The desperation in his tone betrayed him more than any evidence could. Violet looked back at me. Her eyes were searching, pleading. "Dad, is this true? Is there really something I need to know?" I met her gaze, steady as stone. "Yes, sweetheart, and you're about to see it with your own eyes." Winfield stepped forward, the leather case opening with a deliberate click. The truth was about to spill across the ballroom floor. The sound of the latch snapping open seemed to echo louder than the orchestra had minutes earlier. All eyes locked on Winfield as he pulled out a stack of documents, each sheet sliding free with deliberate precision. He laid them on a nearby cocktail table, the white paper stark against the dark silk cloth. Urban lunged forward, his hand half raised, as if he could physically erase what was coming. But Winfield moved smoothly between him and the table, his posture calm, professional. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying with the authority of a man who had spent years preparing for this moment, "you deserve to know who you are dealing with." The whispers swelled. Some guests leaned closer, champagne glasses forgotten in their hands. Others set down their drinks, entirely sensing that what was unfolding wasn't just family drama, it was revelation. Urban tried to laugh, though the sound was brittle. "This is nonsense. Outdated paperwork taken out of context. He's a disgruntled ex-partner, that's all." But Violet had already stepped forward. She reached for the top page, her fingers brushing over the familiar curves of Urban's signature. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. "This is your handwriting. I've watched you sign contracts 100 times." Her observation drew a murmur of agreement from those standing nearby. Someone whispered, "That's his signature, all right." Urban's mask began to crumble. Sweat gleamed at his temples, his smile twitching under the weight of so many eyes. "Darling, don't be fooled. Business is complicated, partnerships dissolve, people get bitter. This man is twisting old agreements into lies." Winfield didn't flinch. He simply slid another document forward, a bank statement with highlighted transfers. $2 million, he said evenly, moved from corporate accounts into Urban Green's personal holdings. Verified by forensic accountants. Not opinion. Fact. The ballroom fell utterly silent. The orchestra had stopped entirely. Now the silence punctuated only by the faint clink of a glass being set down. Violet traced the highlighted numbers, her expression shifting from disbelief to horror. 2 million, she repeated, her voice sharp, carrying across the hall. Urban, is this true? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Urban stammered, searching for words, his hands gesturing wildly. It was complicated business, needed liquidity, I was protecting assets. His excuses tumbled out, each one weaker than the last. I stood a step behind my daughter, my heart pounding, but I let the silence do the work. For months I had been painted as irrelevant. Tonight the evidence made me undeniable. Violet's eyes locked onto Urban's, her face pale but resolute. Protecting assets, she said coldly. Or stealing from your partner. Urban's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Winfield closed the statement and placed it neatly back on the stack. This is only the beginning. I have contracts, emails, and testimony that prove Urban Green is not the man he claims to be. He is a thief. And tonight, you all deserve to see it. The guests erupted into murmurs, the ballroom no longer a celebration, but a courtroom. And for the first time, Urban looked cornered. Urban's face flushed an angry crimson as whispers rippled through the ballroom. He looked like a cornered animal desperate for escape, but too proud to run. Then, with a sudden burst of bravado, he straightened his tuxedo jacket and raised his voice above the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, don't be deceived. This man, this so-called investigator, and my father-in-law are conspiring against me. Jealousy, bitterness, envy, nothing more. His words rang hollow, but they drew the attention of new arrivals, his parents. Margaret and Wilbur Green swept into the circle, forming around us, their aristocratic posture radiating entitlement. Margaret's pearls gleamed under the chandeliers as her sharp voice cut through the tension. Urban, what is this circus? Who are these people disrupting your wedding? Urban latched onto her presence like a lifeline. Mother, father, they're trying to ruin me. He pointed at Winfield, then at me, is dredging up old business disputes and twisting them into lies. And my father-in-law is bitter because we didn't let him control the ceremony. I held my ground, my voice steady. Control, I gave everything I had to this day. Every dollar in this room came from me. The only one trying to control anyone is your son through lies and theft. Wilbur's jaw tightened. His voice was deep, commanding, the kind that had silenced boardrooms for decades. Urban is a successful entrepreneur. His reputation in financial circles is impeccable. These accusations are baseless. Winfield stepped forward calmly, the picture of restraint. Mr. Green, I have evidence verified by forensic accountants, contracts bearing your son's signature, and an email trail showing his intent to steal from me within weeks of our partnership forming. Would you like me to show them to you personally? Margaret scoffed, her tone dripping with disdain. Forensic accountants, contracts. Anyone can fabricate papers. What I see is a bitter old man trying to smear a rising star out of jealousy. The guests stirred uneasily. Some nodded toward the documents, others whispered about the Greens' arrogance. I could sense the shift. People wanted to believe us, but Urban's family was fighting to reclaim control of the narrative. Urban seized the moment. Exactly, lies and fabrications. These men want to destroy everything I've built. Don't let them taint this night. Violet, he turned toward her, his voice suddenly soft, almost pleading. You know me. You've seen the man I am. Don't let them poison you against me. Violet's eyes glistened, torn between love and logic. I could see the war raging inside her. For a brief second, I feared she might falter, that Urban's practiced charm would reel her back in. But then her gaze shifted to me, steady and searching. "Dad," she said softly, "is it all true?" Every word. I placed my hand over my heart. "Sweetheart, I would never lie to you. Not about this. The man standing beside me has nothing to gain except justice. Urban has everything to lose, and he knows it." Urban's parents bristled, but the silence that followed was louder than any argument. The ballroom was turning into a battleground, and the Greens had just fired their first shot. Wilbur Green stepped forward, his voice carrying the kind of authority that had likely cowed rivals in corporate boardrooms for years. "Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you, are we really going to stand here and let this man parade false documents at my son's wedding? This is nothing more than a personal vendetta." He gestured toward Winfield with a dismissive wave. A failed partner who couldn't keep up with Urban's success, and an old widower who resents being left out of the planning. A ripple of murmurs followed. I felt the sting of his words, the deliberate way he painted me as bitter, irrelevant. He knew exactly where to strike. But I had weathered harsher storms in my career. I would not flinch. Winfield remained calm, his eyes steady. "I expected this," he said evenly. "Character assassination is the last refuge of men with no defense. If this were merely personal, why would I invite forensic auditors? Why would I file documents with federal investigators? Why would I be willing to speak under oath?" He tapped the leather case. "This is evidence, not bitterness." Margaret Green lifted her chin, her voice sharp as glass. "Evidence. These are scraps of paper. Do you know how many times Urban has been attacked by jealous men who couldn't match his brilliance? Success attracts envy." She turned to the guests, her pearls glinting. "My son is a visionary, a man of innovation. Are you really going to believe two bitter old men over a proven entrepreneur?" The room stirred again. Some nodded hesitantly, unwilling to cross such a powerful family. Others whispered more urgently, now clearly unsettled. I saw one of Urban's business associates lean toward another, his expression uncertain. The tide was shifting, but it was far from settled. Urban seized the moment, stepping close to Violet. His voice dropped, soft and intimate, but loud enough for others to hear. "Darling, don't let them ruin this for us. They want to embarrass you. Look around, our friends, our future partners. Don't let them taint what we've built." I saw Violet waver. Her fingers twisted the hem of her gown, her eyes darting between Urban's pleading face and the stack of documents on the table. My chest tightened. This was the moment Urban had prepared for the manipulation he had perfected. I took a step forward, my voice calm but firm. "Violet, listen to how he speaks. Every word is about himself, his success, his image. Not once has he said, 'I will prove my innocence.' He can't, because there's nothing to prove. The evidence speaks louder than his charm ever will." Winfield added, "Ask him a simple question. If I am lying, why did his lawyers spend 18 months fighting to keep these documents sealed? Why did they argue technicalities instead of truth?" The guests leaned closer, sensing the duel at the heart of the ballroom. Urban's parents puffed up with indignation. Urban's voice strained with desperation, and my daughter stood caught in the middle, her world cracking open. The ballroom seemed to tilt into silence as Violet stepped forward. She reached for the stack of papers on the cocktail table with deliberate calm, her white gown brushing the floor like waves on marble. Every eye followed her movement. Even Urban froze, as if willing her not to touch the truth laid bare before her. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the first document, a partnership agreement, with bold signatures at the bottom. She held it up, her eyes narrowing. Urban, she said, her voice steady, though I could hear the tremor beneath it. This is your signature. I've watched you sign contracts. This is yours. Urban swallowed hard, sweat glistening along his temple. Darling, it's not that simple. These papers are twisted, taken out of context. They're using them to smear me. But Violet wasn't looking at him anymore. Her sharp mind, the same mind that had carried her through the ruthless tech world of San Francisco, was already working. She skimmed clauses, traced highlighted passages, and pointed to a line that read, "Appropriation of assets." Her brows knit together. "This says you transferred company property into your own name. Explain that to me." Urban's hands flailed slightly, his voice rising. It was strategy business demands bold moves. If I hadn't acted, the company would have failed. I did it for us, for our future. The guests leaned closer, whispers spreading like wildfire. One man near the back muttered, "That's theft, plain and simple." Another shook his head, whispering, "This could ruin him." Winfield didn't move, didn't gloat. He simply pulled out another sheet and slid it across the table toward Violet. Bank records, transfers totaling $2 million, all into personal accounts controlled solely by Urban Green. Dates, times, amounts, all verified. Violet's eyes scanned the numbers. Her lips parted slightly, and when she looked up, her face was pale. 2 million. The words carried across the hall like a bell tolling at a funeral. Urban lunged forward, his voice breaking. "It wasn't like that I was protecting the funds. They're lying to you, Violet. Don't let them poison your mind." His hand shot out toward her arm, but she recoiled, pulling back sharply enough to draw gasps from the crowd. "Don't touch me," she snapped, her voice ringing with a strength that made my chest swell with both pride and sorrow. For the first time, I saw real fear in Urban's eyes. His charm had cracked, his smile had evaporated, and all that remained was desperation. He looked around the room, but no ally stepped forward. His parents stood rigid, their faces masks of fury, but even they offered no words. Violet clutched the documents to her chest, her voice trembling but resolute. "Dad," she whispered, though the entire room heard her, "you were right." The words broke something inside me. For months I had feared she would never see the truth, that Urban's lies would swallow her whole. Now, in front of hundreds of witnesses, she had taken her first step back toward me and away from him. Urban's face twisted, a mask of panic barely contained by a thin veneer of defiance. His voice cracked as he raised it above the hushed murmurs of the crowd. "This is all lies. Don't you see they're working together, trying to destroy me out of jealousy and spite?" He turned to his parents, desperation flashing in his eyes. "Mother, father, tell them. Tell them who I really am." Margaret Green swept forward like a queen defending her throne, her pearls glittering under the chandeliers. "My son is a visionary," she declared, her voice sharp and commanding. This charade is nothing but slander. These men are opportunists exploiting family tensions to humiliate him on his wedding day." Wilbur added, his deep baritone as if pronouncing a verdict from a bench. "Urban has built a respected company. He has been recognized by industry leaders, awarded for his innovation. Do you think that would be possible if he were what they claim?" A few guests nodded uncertainly, but others whispered more boldly. Now, eyes darting back to the papers, Violet clutched. The tide was shifting, and even Urban's parents could feel it. Their voices were strong, but their words lacked proof. Winfield remained steady, his tone measured. "With all due respect, Mr. and Mrs. Green, awards don't erase bank statements. Accolades don't invalidate contracts signed in ink. Your son's reputation may shine in public, but in private he has left a trail of destruction." Margaret bristled, her lips curling in disdain. You're nothing but a bitter man clinging to failure. Winfield didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he gestured toward Violet. Your daughter-in-law is holding the truth in her hands. Ask her what she sees. All eyes turned to Violet. She looked at the pages again, her lips pressed into a thin line. I see numbers that don't lie. I see contracts that prove intent. And I see a husband who never told me any of this. Her voice broke slightly on the last word, but she didn't falter. The murmurs swelled louder this time. People were no longer whispering, they were judging, shifting in their seats, some already pulling out phones to snap discreet pictures of the documents. Urban's mask shattered completely. His voice rose to a shout, sharp with fury. Stop this, all of you. Do you think you can embarrass me in front of my family, my colleagues, my investors? I will not be destroyed by this farce. He slammed his hand down on the cocktail table, rattling glasses and scattering papers. Gasps erupted, but no one moved to support him. Not even his parents. Margaret's proud face cracked for the first time, the faintest flicker of doubt crossing her eyes. I stepped forward, my voice calm and unshaken. The only person destroying you, Urban, is yourself. For the first time, he had no reply. The silence that followed was louder than his rage, and in it, his downfall was already beginning. Urban's chest heaved as he glared at the documents scattered across the table. His voice trembled now, less from anger and more from fear. Violet, he pleaded, you can't believe this. You know me better than anyone. These men are twisting facts. I did what I had to do for us, for our future. She stared at him, her knuckles white around the papers. For us, or for yourself? Her words rang sharp, slicing through the heavy air of the ballroom. Urban tried to step closer, his smile strained into something grotesque. Darling, don't let them turn you against me. Think of everything we've planned, the life, the family, the success. Without me, none of it will happen. You need me. I saw her flinch, but not in the way he intended. His words dripped with manipulation, every sentence another reminder of his control. The guests shifted uneasily, the orchestra silent, the chandeliers blazing down on this theater of truth. I took a step forward, placing a hand gently on Violet's shoulder. Sweetheart, listen carefully. A man who truly loves you would offer proof, not excuses. He would protect your trust, not gamble it away. You don't need him, you never did. Winfield opened his case once more and pulled out the final piece, a printed email chain. Urban, do you deny writing these? He asked, his voice steady as a judge delivering sentence. Urban's face drained of color. That's taken out of context. He muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Violet snatched the papers from Winfield's hand. Her eyes darted across the lines, her lips moving silently as she read. Then she froze, one hand flying to her mouth. This is from the second month of your partnership, she whispered. You were already planning to steal. You plotted this from the beginning. Her voice rose clear and strong now. Urban Green. You didn't just lie to your partner. You lied to me, to everyone in this room. A hush fell so deep I could hear the clink of a single glass being set down. Urban lunged forward, desperation raw. Stop it. Stop reading. You don't understand how business works. His hand reached for her wrist, but she pulled away, eyes blazing. With deliberate grace, Violet slipped the diamond ring from her finger. The gasp from the crowd was almost physical, a wave of sound crashing against the walls. She held the ring in her palm for a long, heavy second before letting it fall. The sharp clink of metal against marble echoed louder than Urban's frantic protests. The wedding is over, she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. There is nothing left to celebrate. Urban staggered back, his face pale, his body trembling as the crowd erupted into murmurs. For the first time that night, the power was gone from his hands, transferred entirely to the woman he thought he controlled. And in that moment, I saw my daughter not as a victim, but as a woman reclaiming her dignity. The diamond's sharp echo against the marble floor lingered like a gavel striking judgment. 300 guests stood in stunned silence, their polished shoes rooted to the ground, champagne glasses frozen midway to their lips. For a heartbeat, the ballroom was suspended in stillness. Then came the rush of whispers. "Did you hear that she just ended it? He stole $2 million. The music had long since stopped, and now even the chandeliers seemed to glare down like silent witnesses." Urban staggered backward, his hands twitching at his sides, his once polished confidence stripped away. This is madness," he sputtered. "It's a conspiracy. They've all turned against me." Margaret Green, still clutching her pearls, forced her way forward, her voice sharp with indignation. "Violet, you don't understand. A marriage isn't something you end with theatrics. Put that ring back on your finger. Do you know how this makes our family look?" But Violet stood tall, her white gown glowing under the chandeliers. She held her head high, her eyes locked on Urban. "The only person who embarrassed this family is him. My father may have been excluded from your secret ceremony, but tonight he gave me the gift of truth." Gasps and scattered applause rippled through the crowd. For the first time, Urban's charm had no hold. His parents' words no longer carried weight. These weren't sympathetic whispers. They were judgments, pronouncements from the court of society. Wilbur Green attempted one last defense. His booming voice carried across the hall. "Enough of this spectacle. We will not allow our family to be smeared in public. Urban, we're leaving." He reached for his son's arm, but Urban shook him off, his desperation bubbling into rage. "No," Urban shouted, his voice cracking. "I won't leave. They're lying, all of them. I can fix this. I can." He faltered, his eyes darting to the incriminating documents spread across the table, to the guests murmuring with disgust, to Violet standing taller with each passing second. I stepped closer, my voice low but firm. "You can't fix truth, Urban. You can only face it." The circle of guests widened, giving us space as if instinctively recognizing a reckoning was underway. Phones glowed as people discreetly recorded, capturing every word, every slip of his unraveling mask. The empire he'd built on charm and deception was collapsing, not in a boardroom or a courtroom, but here under chandeliers and champagne. Urban's shoulders sagged. For the first time, he looked small. The tuxedo that had once made him appear powerful now seemed to hang loose on him like armor that no longer fit. Violet bent down, picked up the ring from the marble floor, and placed it on the cocktail table beside the evidence. Her voice was clear, resolute. "That's where it belongs, with the lies you built this night on." The room erupted in murmurs again, some voices harsh with condemnation, others heavy with pity. But one thing was certain: Urban Green would never recover from this moment. Urban's chest heaved as the weight of silence pressed down on him. His eyes darted wildly, searching for an ally among the sea of faces, but none came forward. Even his parents, standing rigid and pale, offered him no comfort now. The cracks in his perfect image had widened into canyons, and he felt it too. Suddenly he snapped. His voice, once smooth and persuasive, now bellowed through the ballroom with a desperate edge. "You're all fools, every single one of you. Do you think this man," he jabbed a finger at Winfield, "is noble? He's a failure who couldn't handle success. And you," he turned on me, spittle at the corner of his lips, "you're a bitter old man who can't let go of control." The guests recoiled, shocked by his loss of composure. Murmurs rippled across the room. He's unraveling, someone whispered. I held my ground, calm as a stone. I let go the day I wrote the last check, Urban. The only thing I'm holding on to now is the truth. Violet's face hardened, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Stop blaming everyone else. For once in your life, take responsibility. But Urban only grew louder, his voice ragged. Responsibility, I built everything. Without me, you're nothing, none of you. You think these people came for you, Violet? No, they came because of me, because of what I've built. Gasps rose from the crowd. His words weren't just desperate, they were cruel, stripping away the illusion of love in front of everyone. Winfield stepped closer, his tone calm but cutting. And there it is. The truth unmasked, not by documents, but by his own arrogance. He doesn't love anyone here. Not his wife, not his family, not his investors. He only loves what he can take. Applause broke out, not thunderous, but scattered and firm, the kind of clapping that carried judgment. A woman in a sequined gown shook her head. I invested with him, she whispered to her companion. Not anymore. Urban's face twisted as he heard the words. He lurched toward the crowd, his hands raised like a preacher trying to summon faith. Don't turn on me. I made you money, I gave you opportunity, I can do it again. But the crowd wasn't listening anymore. They pulled back, their expressions cold. Phones lifted higher now, recording his collapse for the world to see. Violet's voice rang out clear and unyielding. You didn't build anything, Urban, you stole it. You stole from Winfield, you stole from my father, and you stole my trust. But you won't steal my future. The ballroom erupted, not in applause, but in condemnation, sharp voices, mutters of disgust, people rising from tables to leave. Urban's desperate pleas were drowned beneath the tide of rejection. And as I watched him crumble in the center of the grand ballroom, I realized the greatest punishment wasn't mine to deliver. It was here already handed down by the very people he had courted public disgrace. Margaret Green's pearl necklace trembled against her throat as she stepped forward, her composure fraying for the first time. She grasped Urban's arm, her voice sharp but unsteady. Urban, enough of this. We're leaving. Wilbur, help me. Wilbur moved beside her, his towering frame stiff with anger. He clamped his hand around his son's shoulder, his grip tight enough to show both force and disappointment. We won't stay here another minute. Come with us before you embarrass this family further. Urban twisted free, his face red, his tuxedo rumpled. No, I won't leave. They can't humiliate me like this. He pointed wildly at Winfield, then at me. This isn't over. I'll bury both of you. You'll regret crossing me. His voice cracked, and the crowd murmured louder. Guests no longer whispered. They judged openly now. Pathetic, one man muttered. A woman in a silver gown shook her head. He's finished. Violet stood motionless for a long moment, her wedding gown glowing under the chandeliers. Then she stepped forward, her voice steady each word, carrying the force of a gavel. No, Urban. You are finished. He froze, staring at her as though she had just struck him. You lied to me, she continued, her tone gaining strength. You lied to everyone in this room. You didn't just steal money, you stole trust, dignity, and respect. And you thought you could steal me too. But you can't. Not anymore. Margaret gasped, reaching for Violet. You don't know what you're saying. You're emotional, Violet pulled away sharply, her face resolute. I know exactly what I'm saying. This wedding is over, and so is any tie between me and your son. Gasps rippled again, followed by applause, this time stronger, deliberate. Guests clapped not only for her courage, but for the justice unfolding before their eyes. Urban's eyes darted around the ballroom, desperate for anyone to side with him. But every face he turned to looked away. Even his closest business associates wouldn't meet his gaze. His empire had collapsed, not with lawsuits or board votes, but with public truth. Wilbur's grip tightened once more. His voice was low but audible. "You've disgraced this family for the last time. Come now." Margaret's face had gone pale, her practiced smile gone. She clutched her son's arm, trying to salvage dignity and retreat. But Urban thrashed against their hold, his voice shrill. "You'll all regret this, every single one of you." Violet turned her back to him, then her chin lifted. "The only regret tonight is that I didn't see through you sooner." The applause swelled, drowning out his words. Cameras flashed, recording every second of his downfall. I stepped to Violet's side, placing my hand gently over hers. She didn't look at me, but she leaned into my presence, and in that small gesture I felt the bond between us mend. Urban's parents half-dragged him toward the exit, his protests echoing behind him, but no one moved to stop them. The great doors of the ballroom closed on their retreat, leaving behind only silence and the beginning of healing. The great doors slammed shut behind Urban and his parents, the sound reverberating through the ballroom like the final note of a symphony. For a moment, the silence was absolute. 300 guests stood frozen, the air heavy with the weight of what they had just witnessed. Then slowly, a wave of murmurs filled the space, some hushed in disbelief, others sharp with judgment, still others tinged with admiration for the bride who had stood her ground. Violet stood beside me, her chest rising and falling as though she had run a marathon. The papers trembled in her hands, her knuckles white against the black print of Urban's signature and his betrayal. She turned to me, her eyes glistening. "Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you." I shook my head gently, placing a hand over hers. "No, sweetheart. You don't need to apologize. You wanted to believe in love. That's not a weakness, it's the best part of you. It's him who twisted it into something ugly." Tears welled in her eyes, slipping down her cheeks as the crowd looked on. For a brief moment, it felt as if we were alone, father and daughter, in the middle of a grand hall, reconnecting after months of distance. I pulled her into my arms, and she collapsed against me, her sobs muffled against my chest. Scattered applause began soft at first, then stronger. Guests clapped not for spectacle, but for courage, hers, and perhaps mine as well. Some approached cautiously, offering words of comfort. A woman in a midnight blue gown leaned close and whispered, "She's lucky to have a father like you." Another man muttered, "Urban deserved every second of that." But not everyone lingered. Many guests quietly gathered their coats and purses, slipping out into the San Francisco night with scandal to gossip about for weeks to come. They left behind half-filled champagne flutes, uneaten desserts, and a ballroom heavy with rose petals and ruined dreams. Winfield remained a step back, his expression calm but softened now. He closed his leather case, his mission complete. Our eyes met, and I nodded in gratitude. He returned it, then melted into the background, giving space for what truly mattered, my daughter and me. Violet lifted her head, her mascara smudged but her eyes clear. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted. "I feel like everything I believed in just shattered." I brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Then we'll start fresh. You're stronger than you realize." Tonight wasn't an ending, it was a rescue. The orchestra, silent until now, began to pack up their instruments. The clink of cases and chairs being stacked filled the air. The party was over, but in its place something far more important remained: truth. As I held Violet close, I whispered a promise only she could hear. "You'll never face the world alone, not while I'm still breathing." The ballroom, once filled with music and laughter, now echoed with the faint rustle of silk gowns and the soft clatter of silverware being cleared away. Guests trickled toward the exits, some whispering in disbelief. Others shaking their heads, already crafting stories they would repeat at dinners and board meetings for months to come. The wedding that was supposed to cement Urban's social standing had ended as his public downfall. Violet and I remained by the cocktail table, the ring glinting where she had placed it beside the damning documents. She stared at it for a long moment, her face solemn but resolute. "It's strange," she said quietly, "how something that once felt like a promise can now look like a chain." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "That chain is broken now, and you broke it yourself." Winfield stepped forward, his leather case tucked securely under his arm. His eyes were steady, but there was a flicker of something softer in them, a satisfaction tempered by weariness. "It's over," he said. "Urban won't recover from this. Not here, not now, not ever." I extended my hand, gripping his firmly. "You gave me the tools to protect my daughter. For that I owe you more than I can say." He shook his head. Justice was long overdue. Tonight wasn't just about you or me. It was about making sure he can't hurt anyone else. Violet turned to him, her voice steady though her eyes still shimmered. "Thank you. I didn't know the man I married. But now I do, and I know who he really is." Winfield gave a small nod, then slipped quietly into the thinning crowd, fading into the shadows like a soldier finished with his mission. The staff began extinguishing candles one by one, dimming the chandeliers until the ballroom was bathed in a soft, golden glow. Violet and I walked slowly toward the doors. Her arm linked through mine the way it had been when she was a little girl, clinging to me as we crossed busy streets. Outside, the cool night air wrapped around us, carrying the distant clang of cable cars and the hum of city life. We paused on the steps of the Fairmont, looking out at San Francisco's lights stretching endlessly toward the bay. For the first time in months, I felt the knot in my chest loosen. Violet leaned her head against my shoulder. "Dad," she whispered, "I don't know how to rebuild from this. But I'm glad I don't have to do it alone." I kissed the top of her hair, my voice low but certain. "We'll rebuild together. And we'll do it with honesty, not lies." We descended the steps, leaving behind the ruins of a wedding that had never truly belonged to her. The scandal would echo through society circles, no doubt. But for us, the only thing that mattered was that truth had been restored, dignity reclaimed, and love, real love, remained. When I look back on that night, I realized the $120,000 I lost wasn't wasted. It bought something more valuable than flowers, music, or champagne. It exposed the truth. It freed my daughter from a man who would have stolen not only her future, but her very sense of self. Sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give isn't money or comfort. It's the courage to stand firm when lies threaten to take root. To anyone listening who has faced betrayal, especially from those closest to you, know this silence can be powerful, but truth is stronger. Don't be afraid to shine a light on deception, even if it means standing alone for a moment. Because in the end, you won't be standing alone, you'll be standing in the company of integrity, and that's a far richer legacy than wealth. If you are a parent, I urge you to remember, money can be replaced, but trust cannot. And if you are a son or daughter, never forget that a parent's sacrifice deserves honor, not exploitation. Now I want to ask you, have you ever lived through a betrayal like mine? How did you face it, and what did you learn from it? Share your story in the comments below so others can draw strength from your experience. If this story spoke to you, please like, subscribe, and share it. Thank you for listening. Your time is a gift I do not take lightly.